Thank you, Katarina. Thank you very much for this invitation and this opportunity to present. Bit of a contrast to the previous presentations because I'm coming from a very technology-centered point of view. People have been talking about patient-centered care, that we need to be centered on our patients. People have been talking about innovation and can it help us? And it makes me really happy to be able to present now because those are exactly the outpoints. So I go into presentation mode. We're going to have a fairly, a very multifunctional, multimedia presentation. I start with a set of slides as my predecessors did. So I hope you can see my presentation now. What you see here is the iHomeLab Visitor Center. So the iHomeLab, we are split into two parts. We have a visitor center where we show our research, and then the research center where we do our research. And this here, if you could come and visit us in Lucerne, Switzerland, is what you would be able to see. Just a brief introduction. So we do user and application-oriented research projects. We have about 20 people. Well, it's actually 25 people, but a lot of people working part-time, so we have 20 full-time equivalents. We have, over the last 10, 11 years, worked with over 170 different partners. So there's SMEs, people from industry, business, end-user organizations, and so forth. And also we are coming out of the area of embedded systems, IoT, these sorts of things. Therefore, we also have a certified Bacnet test laboratory. I don't expect you to know what Bacnet is. It's one of these thousands of protocols when you're working with smart homes and the like. And probably our USP is that we have this iHomeLab Visitor Center where we do guided tours and demonstrations, where we really show people what is our research and how can technology help to change. We use storytelling and we show very little technology actually, but you'll see a bit of a view into that in a second. So we have three areas of research. One is smart energy management, sort of smart grids, demand response. One is called safe building intelligence, which is all about digitization, smartness, as Katarina said, we all need more smartness. Maybe intelligence, maybe smartness, we'll see. And the other is that, and that's really the topic of our presentation today, is active assisted living. So active assisted living is technology to enable elderly people a longer, active, and also independent lifestyle. The key word here, which is not unfortunately here, but which we use all the time, is a self-determined lifestyle, because we want to be competent, we want to be autonomous. And it's the same for people of all ages. And here we are investigating what is the various uses of technology to improve this. As mentioned, we have our visitor center. In a normal year, we would have about 3,500 visitors per year. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has really killed things. The second quarter, for instance, we had last year, we had 1,000 visitors just in the second quarter. And this year it was for 29. So it's really having quite an impact on the way we work. So the way that we work is actually we apply user-centricity in all of our work. We start with the users. We then try and elicit their requirements via workshops and so forth, move on to system design, implementation, and go into a field trial. Usually the first field interaction is really rapid prototyping. We speak to people, we say, what if is this technology something which will work for you? And then we do another iteration of design before going to the second round of field trials. So everything that we have done, all of these many projects we have done, we've been talking to the users, we've been trying to pick up what their actual needs are, and then I have various examples where this has actually led to a change in the project scope, the change of the project goals, because we found out that perhaps the first hypothesis we had as to what would help people in a particular situation, elderly people in particular, is not what they need. Or perhaps, and probably the most common mistake, particularly when you've got too many engineers working on this, is that the solutions they develop are much too complex and you have to simplify. So this is really our thesis. By taking a user-centric approach, we can design technology to help the elderly lead an independent life, to improve the quality of life. And then in order to introduce that, I have created a short film, well, short, relatively short, 16, 17-minute film, in which you will see some of these impressions, and these are impressions you would get of the iHomeLab when you came. So I would hand over to the studio now, and they can transfer to my avatar at the iHomeLab. So welcome to Switzerland. Welcome to the iHomeLab here at the University of Applied Sciences in Lucerne. Here we want to tell you a bit about our research into active assisted living, research for elderly people. Now I'd like to go into our visitor center. I'd like to ask our butler, James, to open for us.
Hi, nice to see you again. Shall I open the gate for you?
Yes, please, James.
Welcome. I'm James, the virtual butler of iHomeLab. I hope you have an insightful and exciting visit. Have fun.
So welcome into our iHomeLab Visitor Center. Here we show visions of the future. Here we show people what it is that we do. At the start of the visit, you would actually see a 10-minute film which explains what it is we do. Because this is not currently possible, we show you a short introduction. Now I'd like to hand over to James, who's going to show you a brief film, an introduction to our research.
Hi, I'm back again. Now let me take you into the fascinating world of the iHomeLab, where I show you which topics we are working on and how, together with our partners, we are creating innovative solutions for the future. The world population continues to grow. Life expectancy is increasing and living standards are rising. This has consequences. The most obvious one is simply, we need more. More of everything. More energy, more food, more living space, more care for the elderly. Simply more of everything, and all on a planet with limited resources. Things could get pretty uncomfortable in the long run. Under the motto, Living in the Future, today, we perform research into meaningful technological solutions so that hopefully things won't get really uncomfortable. And now I'll take you into the deepest depths. Right into the heart of the iHomeLab.
Please join me and I'll tell you something about our active assisted living. So in order to explain what it is that we're doing in our research on active assisted living, so that's research to enable elderly people to stay at home as long as possible, we tell you a story. We tell you the story of our only inhabitant of the iHomeLab, Anna. As you can see, Anna is an elderly lady. She's in her late 80s. Her husband, unfortunately, no longer with us. Children have all moved out. But she's able to live at home quite well with the technology that she uses and integrates into her daily life. Here you can see, for instance, our Electro Robot. This was a project we did in the AAL call 2010. For which we won a prize for the best project in 2013. This was at a time when the first e-bikes came about, and she could use this. The sensors here in the grip allows you to go up and down and over any sorts of terrain without even noticing that you're in a different, that it's not being on a flat. Anna, of course, also uses the other things. You have here integrated things like navigation, but also the shopping list. So Anna has just come home. She's scrolling through her shop list to see, do I have everything? Have I bought everything that I need?
Du hast eine neue Nachricht von deiner Tochter Claire.
Of course, in the future, all of our devices are purely integrated. She doesn't need to have a mobile phone to get a message. Rather, she gets a notification here. Of course, Claire is her daughter. So she's wondering, what is it that Claire has said? So she says, okay, tell me.
Ich spiele dir die Nachricht jetzt ab.
So I don't expect you to understand Swiss German, but the message is from her granddaughter. Got a bicycle for her birthday just a few weeks ago. And look, now she can already ride the bike without training wheels. Anna, of course, wants to immediately reply. Perhaps she doesn't know what's going on with over there. In any case, what she does is she makes her way here, forgets all about her shopping, and makes her way across to our magic cube over in the corner. There she is on the way, and then, unfortunately, she's a little bit distracted or something, and then it happens. She falls down. So what's going to happen next?
Hallo Anna, alles in Ordnung? Bitte gib mir eine Antwort.
So Anna is of course not the only inhabitant of the house. We also have James. James is watching out. And what's happened here is that Anna, she is wearing one of these fall detection devices. Fall detection devices that were part of our research about 10 years ago. These days, they're commercially available. You can buy these and integrate them into your system. So the question is, what happens now? Anna hasn't answered, and James knows that something's happening, so he has a possibility. The possibility he has is he can send me a message. So here, for instance, on my phone, he has sent me a message saying Anna has fallen. And if I'm at work, I have to see what's going on. With this, there's also, for instance, the integration of access, permissions, and so forth. And then I can switch on here the webcam. So there's a webcam just over there where we can see that there is Anna lying on the ground and unfortunately not moving. What can I do? I'm a little bit further away, so the best thing I can do is to escalate the situation. I can now send the alarm on to the emergency call number. This was a film sequence that we took with the local emergency centre, and just as I got the permission to have a look into Anna's room and to see how she's going, also we can imagine that the lady at the emergency call centre can also look in. So she also now has access to the webcam. She can see Anna lying there, nobody around to help. Can have a quick look and see, okay, EKG. Can see that the heart's still beating, so she's still alive, but obviously she needs help. It sounds like science fiction, but in our research we're looking at different sensors, LIDAR, 3D cameras. Also, of course, we have Fitbits, these sorts of things which can measure heart rate. So she can see now Anna is alive and in need of help. And then she can have another look perhaps at the medical records, see what's going on there. And when she sees and decides, okay, now we need to send somebody, she can call up a local map of the area, sees which ambulances are there, which one is actually available, can take all of this information, and then drop it down with the GPS coordinates and so forth, which mean that they can take off immediately and come to us up here at the iHomeLab, zooming around Bohr. This is the suburb where we are, until they come finally screeching to a halt in front of the iHomeLab.
Der Rettungsdienst ist eingetroffen. Ich öffne die Türe.
Of course, this is another time where you need some technology or something like James. If he wasn't there to open the door for the ambulance, then of course they would have to break in. It would cause damage to the house.
Anton, sag das ist Christian, 121. Was wir an Patientin vor Ort, Kreislauf stabil, Status 3.
So status 5 is the happy end. This means that actually as Anna is feeling good and the ambulance is now ready to be used for something else. So Anna is now okay. She is now fine. We can put her back to be ready for her next trip here at the iHomeLab. Her next job here at the iHomeLab. So she will stand here and wait. So this is also an example of all the different sorts of technologies and things which we use for the results which we are getting out of our AAL research. And if we look here at the wall behind me, we see various other examples of research which we have done and other projects which we did. For instance, this first one here, relaxed care, is this cube. The cube started out as something which would then monitor the elderly and send me a message. We quickly found out this is a very bad idea. We need a two-way communication. We need something which is very, very simple. So we have these tokens here. So if I take a token, for instance, this blue one, I put it on the middle here, it detects it, and then I get a notification either on the second cube, which is over in my room, or also on the app which I have on my phone, saying, I know now that my mum wants me to give her a call. This is one example of the research that we do. So another example of the research that we do here is also a lot regarding the interactivity, and also how we have to design user interfaces so that people with dementia or just elderly people who are not used to electronic devices can also use them. One example here is called Sam and Me. This is this one here. If I give it a double tap like that, it switches on. We get a very simplified interface here. I can only do a few things. I can say, okay, what's the weather going to be like? You have Sam who comes and tells me what the weather's going to be like. And anytime I want to go back, I just give it a tap, and I have possibilities here. Another example here on the shelf below, it's called Kith and Kin. This was something which we did for elderly people who are in an isolated situation. It was also an experiment to see how can we take very simple materials, so just a tablet, and then a couple of 3D printed devices, which we can then click it together, and then something quite different comes out of this. And the interesting thing here is simply that this is still touch sensitive exactly on these points here. And so I have an extremely simplified interface. If I want to call someone, if I want to exchange pictures with my friends, or if I want to play a game. This is something for very specifically for people who are living in isolation. Here we have a couple more examples. These are some of all the projects which have now managed to make it into the market. This one here, for instance, is the project which we did, the iSense. This is actually an inactivity sensor. So in contrast to the other devices we've been looked at which measure something, this is actually a device which recognizes typical activities, and then when they don't happen, it gives you an alarm. So for instance, if an elderly person has not got up in the morning, or if usually they would get up and go into the kitchen and this hasn't happened, then you get an alarm that something different has happened. So another project which just finished last year was Home for Den, Home for Dementia. This is all about how you can make your home help you to evaluate whether or not you have a problem with dementia. We're using here typical sensors. For instance, this is a pressure sensor which will go into your bed. When we put this in, then it starts measuring when somebody has been in the bed. It can start measuring their sleep, how well they are sleeping. The next one is a multi-sensor. This is something we've developed ourselves here at the iHomeLab. This is something which would go into the kitchen. And in the kitchen, it will then measure air temperature, humidity, perhaps some noise and so forth, and can let you know whether people are in the kitchen, whether they're cooking, typical daily activities. This is about the whole activities of daily living and how we can identify them. The final sensor which we then put into the mix is a typical presence sensor, not something we developed, but rather something you can buy. So you have a presence sensor which then says whether somebody's in the living room or not. And so as a result of this, you can start to put together a picture of the daily rhythm of the people who live in this apartment. And this is a key point. It's this daily rhythm, because the daily rhythm is actually fairly deterministic. We are all creatures of habit. So we repeat ourselves, we get up at the same time, we go to bed at the same time, and if this starts to break down, this can be a sign of dementia. So this was the second part of the project. If you start measuring these over time, you can then also measure how regular they are, what sort of a rhythm this particular person has, and you can start to see when this breaks apart. So here in this simulation, you can see, for instance, that somebody starts going to bed in the middle of the day, they start going into the kitchen and cooking at different times. This whole daily rhythm falls apart. And part of the research was to measure this in the real situation, and also to develop a sort of an artificial intelligence algorithm which can take this and say, there's a chance now that you have dementia. That would be a good idea to go to the doctor. So another project we're doing is in collaboration with the University Hospital in Bern with the Institute ARTOG. The project is called Cyberhuman Parkinson's, and it's all about detecting the effect of Parkinson's, and more specifically, to gather more data on the way that the patient is reacting to the drugs that they take, the medicine that they take for Parkinson's. So one of the things we are using here is actually these sort of Fitbits, which can measure the acceleration. So what we have here is one of these typical polar watches, and we can then measure actually the acceleration. Now, of course, 9.8 meters a second. And then if somebody comes into a tremor situation because of Parkinson's, then their hand starts to vibrate. And we can measure this. So we can measure this, and we know then when does the person have one of these Parkinson's tremor attacks. We can then correlate this with other information. The picture you see at the other side We can show if you are here down at the iHomeLab, this is how this integrates with localization. Where am I when this happens, what time of the day it is, and so forth. And this gathers us more and more information, which we can then collate and put into a presentation, sort of a dashboard for the doctor, so they know better how to adjust the medicine which they're giving this Parkinson's patient. So I hope you've enjoyed this short glimpse into the work we're doing down here at the iHomeLab in Switzerland. We have gathered a few ideas of what we can do to make the life of the elderly better in the future. Hopefully, I can also greet you in person here in the very near future.
I'm not sure if there's anything else I need to say after that. Huh? So I don't know, Magnus, how I'm doing for time. If we go straight to questions now, I have, of course, another 50 slides, which I could show you details on all of the projects and the rest, but I think I'll spare you. You get the idea of what it is we do and how we work.
Perfect.
So thank you very much, Andrew. I'm a technique nerd myself, so I love all these different examples actually. But since I had my mother also at an elderly care home for 5 years before she passed away, fortunately. But the thing she was talking about all the time was to lead an independent life. And the more diseases she got and the increased immobility, I really wanted things for her which weren't available in order to help her to lead an independent life. And I also remember when the Japanese introduced shower robots 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Time passes so quickly. And all the people said, oh, how could they, actually exchange people for robots in the showers? But then when you talk to people who needed help in the shower, who did they prefer? They prefer the robots. Of course, they want to have humans talking and taking care of them. But so I think it's to lead an independent life is a very good vision.
And I think that you've highlighted a number of points there. We as humans have three basic needs. The one is to feel competent, the other to be autonomous, and the other to have a social interaction. And I think that technology can help us, can augment our capabilities so that we can be autonomous. And exactly what you're talking about with the shower here. Of course, I would rather have a robot to help me in the shower because then I'm not depending on a person. I'm then determining what is happening. I'm feeling that I am in control of the situation. And this is the direction we try and go with our research. We try and develop technologies which help the people, but keep the control in the place of the people and don't take it away from them. I think this is often a misunderstanding by people who are not involved in these projects, that they think that we as technologists, we want to take control. That's never been actually the goal of automation. The goal of automation is to increase efficiency and to enable people to do more than they could before, not to take things away.
Magnus.
Yes.
Any questions?
There's a couple of questions. The first two questions came from, can you please stop talking during the film? And that was a valid question, to be honest. You don't have to answer that, but we noticed. Then you have two really good questions that I like to ask. First of all, what challenges do you see when you look at the traditional user-centered techniques? Appropriate application design and evaluation fail to properly support infrastructure design and evaluation.
Okay, so I assume this is somebody coming from the design thinking community. So you're looking very, very closely at people, at just the single person. This is one of the learnings that we have made. You can't just look at the person, you have to look at their context, and you have to look at their situation. With elderly people, as we've heard in a number of presentations before, Henk mentioned it, Karen mentioned it, and so forth. I think even Henrik touched on it, that you have this informal caregivers. You have so many informal caregivers, and this has such a huge influence on the life of the elderly that we even have some projects which are purely centered on supporting the informal caregivers. So supporting just their families and these sorts of things, supporting perhaps the ecosystem which is around them. And so this is where I see not necessarily that design thinking on the user-centric approaches are failing, but rather that you have to expand the scope. When you're thinking about who is my user, it's not just a single elderly person. It's perhaps their son, their grandchildren, it's the people they talk to. And we talk about here the grandchild trick. If you want to introduce technology to elderly people, it's often more effective to give that to their grandchildren and then say, hey, go talk to your grandmother about this, than to give it to their children or to a carer, because they interact completely differently with their grandchildren. The technology will be accepted then. Yeah.
Good answer. Thanks, very interesting. How do you benchmark yourself internationally? Scandinavia has a lot to offer in terms of monitoring. More exchange could be beneficial.
I mean, I would be absolutely welcome to, happy to exchange with more people in the Netherlands. We have, let me quietly think briefly. Of course, I know, I think in Switzerland we're the best there is, if I wouldn't be able to say anything else. Internationally, we have very good track record. We've done dozens of projects in the joint program on AAL. And these are always with European consortiums. And so I think we can measure with the best of people around Europe regarding our knowledge, in particular on this intersection of technology and solutions to help the elderly. So smart home solutions, the extension of smart home solutions to smart environments. I think we are really, really amongst the best. And like I said, we have a huge focus on how we disseminate our technology, how we show people. We're very involved also with local societies for the elderly. So, you know, care organizations, but also community organizations. And this gives us a bit of an edge. But I'm very open to collaboration. All of our projects, we don't have any university-funded projects. These are all funded by the EU programs or Swiss funding, which means we always need partners. We always need consortia. So I'm always very much looking forward to collaboration with other people. In fact, one of our greatest collaborators is a Dutch company, Vertask. So it's why not put Sweden into that as well?
That's good. I think both Sweden and the Netherlands are interested in that. So, here's a question with two dimensions. First of all, there was a lot of cool tools. What is your favorite? And that was the first part of the question. And the other is, of all these tools, how many of them are working in the society for the elderly, and to what extent? I mean, I can understand that some of them are in test beds, but to what extent are they working in society?
So the iHomeLab, as I demonstrated it just now, this is really a dissemination tool. And everything, like for instance, the ANS showcase, this is something which everybody can understand and relate to. But if you look at it, there's a mix. You have these things which are already in the market, like the fall sensor and these sorts of things. And you have things which are perhaps interesting. I mean, Karin talked about this integration of information across everything, but we're not there yet. So this is where things are just over the horizon, and then there are other things which are science fiction. So something like James that can really interact with us in a natural fashion, the way we envision that doesn't exist. So what do I think is cool? Cool always takes on various things. Actually, this walking frame, the motorized walking frame, I think this is pretty cool. That was way before my time at the iHomeLab. I've only been in the team for 2.5 years now. But this is one thing we had the experience that some of our field test subjects, they just didn't want to give it back. Because in particular, one old guy that he'd been going for a walk in the forest for years and years and years. And because he was becoming a little bit fragile, he could no longer do this safely. But when he had that, he could do everything once again. And these are the things which I think are cool. So from a point of view of activity on helping people to get outside, I think the Rollator is really one of the good ones. From a purely technical one, there's another technology which we didn't show. That's the one we're doing with the company out from the Netherlands. This is an avatar, speech recognition, speech-based interaction. This is really quite cool. And then what you can do with the data in the background. Yeah, that's what I personally think from a purely technical point of view is cool. But from points of view of enabling people, I think we need to go more in the direction of the Rollator. Yeah. Did I answer both questions? There were two.
No, you answered the first one. The second part is, okay, when it comes to utilization in the society, I mean, where are you when it comes to that?
Nowhere near where we want to be.
The relator is not everywhere, but it sounds like...
It's nowhere where we want to be. I mean, like I mentioned with the fall sensor or the inactivity sensor, these are things which have made it into the market. Also, this avatar solution, which I'm talking about, this is also in the market, but the penetration is very, very low. And doing a little bit of advertising for the blog entry that I've written for Katarina, I have the feeling actually that we need to, there's been a lot of moving now towards saying, okay, we've done so many cool projects, but there's not enough in the market. What can we do to improve it? And everybody's moving to startups and these sorts of things. But I think there needs to be a bit more of a mix. I'm not sure that we've found the right technologies. And part of this is also the fragmentation of the market. So we have very different, in this project we have very different cultures in different countries, very different needs. So for instance, this Home for Them project that I mentioned in the film, one with the monitoring of elderly people, determining their activities of daily living. The first problem we had to contend with was actually the quality of data. This is what Henrik mentioned at the very beginning. It's very difficult to get these sorts of systems working. And then the second thing was very surprising. We had 3 test sites, one in Switzerland, one in Germany, and one in Italy. And you could actually see from the data which country the people lived in, just purely based on when do they get up, when do they go to bed, do they spend more time in the kitchen or the living room, and these sorts of things. And this means then that all of these solutions we develop, they're either extremely focused, it provides one functionality, like I fall over and I detect something, and many people look at that and say, this is not a complete solution, I don't want it. Or it's a complete solution, but it only suits this particular country, this particular healthcare system, this particular way of paying for things. This is the other question. Who pays for these solutions? Do I pay? Do my children pay? Me as the elderly person, do I pay? My children pay? Does the health system pay? There are all of these sorts of questions. And who actually benefits from this? If I stay at home longer, yes, I want to be autonomous and I benefit from this. There's also a benefit for society because I'm not taking hospital beds and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of open questions there regarding just how you actually bring these things into the market.